Hello. Well, this is going to be part two of my look at the Guermantes Way, the third book in Proust's In Search of Lost Time. Um, I was wrong about a few things. Um, this is a confusing book, and I don't mean just the Guermantes Way. I mean the entire Proustian project. On the one hand, it's very similar to a book like, say, Moby Dick, which is almost completely plotless. And it's really just, a lot of things happening that have no real particular um, timestamp or importance in relationship to other things necessarily. And in a lot of names and relationships and a lot of conversations. I'm describing here Proust. But both books have the same difficulty, having been written in a different period in which, there's a huge, expansive kind of plotlessness to both of them. They're written in different periods, and they're written for different purposes, and there are many differences between the two of them. But the difficulty here with Proust is that there are so many people. There is something like 2,000 named characters in the course of the 7 books. And although there are many that recur constantly, there are a lot of names that are very, very similar. There are the Duke and the Duchess of Guermantes, but there's also the Princess of Guermantes and there are other Guermantes. There are someone like the Baron de Cherluse, but there's also another character named Charles Morel. And although, in a careful reading, you're not going to get those confused, again, you have these similarities between people. And the same thing happened here to me. I said that this book contained 2 parties at the Guermantes, and that is not true. The first part is actually a relative, I believe, of the Guermantes, or somebody in the Guermantes Way, but not the Guermantes, the Duke and Madame of Guermantes themselves. It was actually Villeparisis and Madame de Villeparisis. And I suppose I should know who that is in some sort of deeper sense than a name, because I know that she's appeared in other books, and I know that she is going to appear in the next book. But honestly, other than just being a name of a person that they go to from time to time, I couldn't tell you. And maybe that's a flaw on my part, but the book is long, the book is complicated, and there's at one time a lot going on and absolutely nothing going on. I mean, you have to imagine here that you arrive at a dinner party on page, I don't know, 200, and for the next 75 pages, literally, you get a minute discussion of the main character walking from place to place and talking to various people and the various maneuverings back and forth and conversations he overhears between all these people. And intersposed with this, there might be like one line of dialogue, and then 2 paragraphs or maybe even pages of commentary about the character who made this, or how this particular piece of dialogue relates to something else that has happened either in a prior book or, in like even sometimes the previous conversation or the previous paragraph, or in relationship to something that's going to happen later. And okay, so once, no problem, right? But over the course of that 75 pages, that could happen 20, 30, 40, 50 times. The same kind of complexity given to these words. And not only that, but, this is something that if you read a lot of literature, you will notice, is that sentences have typically gotten shorter in more recent literature. And this book is still written in a kind of purple prose, a kind of lengthy sentence structures. And there are places where, from the beginning of a sentence to the end of a sentence, you can lose track of who you're actually reading about, because this will be like in a 2-page paragraph that begins with uh, no names, that just begins with pronouns like she and he, or positions like the Duke or the Baron or something like that. And in context, you know who it's talking about at the beginning of that paragraph. But as you read through, it talks about maybe the Duke has said this thing to this other person, and this other person responded this kind of way at this other time, or there was this look in this person's face that indicated this or something to this effect, and then you get to this place where there's like 4 or 5 sentences that are 25 to 50 words each, and have interpolated clauses and all kinds of other things going on. And you lose track of what in the hell you're actually supposed to be getting from this, what you're supposed to do with this information. And, this is obviously quite deliberate on the part of Proust. He is involving you in this world, and involving you in this sort of, this train of consciousness, this vomit of thought kind of approach on purpose, and sort of almost like confusing you on purpose, in the sense of he's making something that could be said in a very plain way, in a very, very, very convoluted way, because he's not trying to say that this or that or the other thing is right or wrong or this or that, but that it's an overheard this, it's an overheard that, it's remembered this, it's a remembered that, it's a perspective of this person, a perspective of that person, and that is what's going on here. So, I'm not talking here just about the Guermantes Way, I'm talking about the structure of the entire book, from beginning to end. And this particular book, there really are, it's kind of like set pieces. Like there's a early part of the book where the the family of the main character has moved to Paris again, to an apartment in Paris. And this apartment just so happens to be near where where Madame Guermantes lives. And the main character gains something of a fascination for her. She seems to be a woman in about her 20s, which seems to be about the age of the main character here, or maybe just slightly older. Anyway, he sees her as some kind of sexual object of sorts, and he takes to doing what would be called stalking nowadays. Again, there's a kind of creepiness that is partially, I think, deliberate on the part of Proust, in the sense of he's kind of letting loose the id of this character in a way that is almost disturbing and uncomfortable. Id being the part of the brain that is controlled simply by emotions, by desires, by what it wants, by what Freud, who coined id, also called the pleasure principle. And the main character can't seem to get into the Guermantes way here. He can't seem to become a part of it. And so he decides he is going to go visit her nephew, which is Saint Loup, who is at Danciers doing his military service stuff. So he goes there, and he stays in the barracks with Saint Loup for a little bit, and he stays in the hotel next to Saint Loup a little bit. And there's a lot of commentary here about soldiers and soldiering and this kind of thing. And then he gets a telephone call, and this is where the technologies of modernism began to intrude in a way that they hadn't up to this point. Cars, I think, have been mentioned before. I think telegrams and things of that nature have been mentioned. Possibly even airplanes have been mentioned at some point. I can't recall exactly, but I think these sorts of things have been mentioned. But this is when these kind of technologies begin to intrude. There are cars here at Danciers as well. He gets a phone call from his grandmother. He goes back to Paris. His grandmother is gravely ill. He tries to help the family take care of her. They get advice from 2 different doctors, one of which says she's very, very sick. The other doctor says, oh no, she just needs clean air. She just needs to get out and about. Anyway, he takes her out to the Champs Elysees, and she has a stroke, and it's just like, okay, it seems like the second Doctor was completely and utterly wrong, but because he's got the prestigious name, they all think he's correct in what he's saying. In any case, his grandmother starts to decline. She actually even attempts to commit suicide at one point, which is bizarre. It's not a kind of event that you would expect in a book like this. It's not real graphic in any way. It just indicates that she's trying to off herself. And then a few days later, she dies. And at this point, if you've ever read Camus, The Stranger, which begins with the main character's mother dying, I think the first sentence is, my mother died today, and the main character seems relatively emotionless about it. It seems to me that Camus got that kind of emotionlessness almost from this moment here, because as much as his grandmother meant to the main character, her death really has no effect on him here. You find out later. It does have an effect, but later. Okay, so after this, then he goes to that party I mentioned with the Villa Paresis that I mistakenly said was the Guermantes. And of course, the Guermantes are in fact there, as are all these other society people. And he goes around talking to a guy named Legrandin, talking to a guy named Nerpois. Um, the Baron de Charlus shows up there for a while, um, and he actually leaves. He actually leaves this party with the Baron, and the Baron makes an offer. I think I said this last time, to sort of help him, to lead him, to guide him, to give him some good, guidance, as an older man to a younger man kind of thing. But there's also kind of a strangeness and an overriding kind of uncomfortableness to this entire encounter. You will find out in Sodom and Gomorrah, the next book, that one of the reasons why the Baron is got this kind of creepy edge to him is that he is gay. And what that means and how that matters will become a big issue in the next book, so I'll deal with it there. But he's essentially here, although the main character does not seem to realize it exactly. What he is attempting to do here is to become close to this main character, potentially to seduce him or to have him as a lover, possibly. And it also seems to be the case that the Baron just likes being around young men, whether or not he is able to have any sexual contact with them, that he very much enjoys a homosocial environment of young men. In any case, that's not mentioned here at all, because here what we're led to believe is that the Baron is very masculine, he's a very uberman, that he likes virility in men and things of that nature. He's very virile, very, very traditional masculine. And I think that is done on purpose to set up a contrast later. But anyway, that happens, and then the main character does in fact go to the Guermantes, and does in fact have a part of the Guermantes, but it's a dinner, but it's basically the same kind of thing as the party at Villa Paresis, which is why I got them confused, honestly, because, I suppose if you are reading this with a fine-tooth comb, you will notice the differences, but really and truly, there's not this overriding huge difference. And other things happen too. I mean, he has a dinner, a sort of a lunch date with Saint Loup and Saint Loup's mistress, who is a unworthy woman, sort of a tainted woman. Turns out that she's an actress, and her name is Rachel. Rachel. Anyway, she's a prostitute, and an aspiring actress, and she's possibly exploiting Saint Loup for money. Possibly. It's heavily implied, although it appears that St. Loup is okay with this, even though it is really uncomfortable for his family. The main character also, earlier on, had gone to see a play with La Burma, the actress that was fascinated with as a kid and fell out of love with after he saw her perform and thought it was kind of eh. Well, this time he has no interest in her whatsoever, and he ironically notices her genius. So, for what it's worth, he is growing in his understanding and in his appreciation of artistic things and that sort of thing. The whole sort of, you know, focus on Alstere and his paintings, which occupied a larger part of In the Shadow, in the flower. What is it called? In the shadow of the flower of in the shadow of young girls in flower. The second book, I didn't really focus on it as deeply as I could have, but there's a large commentary there about art and how Stier does painting. And so the contrast there is between the thing and the represented thing, and how the represented thing has a certain kind of reality that the thing does not. And so as the main character has been looking at all these Alstiers and talking with Alstere the painter, he begins to get an appreciation for seeing the real world as the kind of stylized, specialized kind of world that Alstere is creating. And this is one of the reasons why he even goes to the Guermantes in this book, is because the Guermantes have a collection of Alstiers, and he spends a long time looking at these. As a matter of fact, the Duke leads him in and says, "Hey, here, take a look at these Alstiers, take your time." And he spends apparently like 45 minutes to an hour looking at these things and comes out and realizes that dinner had been held up entirely because he was off doing this. He did not mean to be selfish, he didn't mean to do that, but they held dinner for him. And then they all have dinner and they have, this rambling conversation about everything in the world, all these pretentious wannabe aristocratic people, and this sort of salon attitude, this kind of laissez-faire, ennui-filled kind of decadent kind of atmosphere. And then he again has an appointment to go talk to the Duke. Not the Duke, the Baron de Chalouse. And this time the Baron gets really pissed off at him and says he's been spreading rumors about him. Again, we have no idea what the context is for this at the time, and neither does the main character, who is at once confused and enraged by the Baron's doing this. And he actually takes the Baron's special hat and throws it on the floor and stomps it. And there's other violence in this book too, which is kind of unusual. St. Loup punches somebody and slaps somebody, gets in a couple of fights because people say bad things about Rachel at various points. And so the main character here, like you said, destroys this hat, and then he and the Baron kind of sort of make up, which just seems bizarre, because the Baron is just an ass. He's just a complete and utter ass here. And the reason for this is because he doesn't want his secret of his sexuality to get out. But as you're going to find out in the next book, everybody knows. Everybody knows. But at the same time, it's sort of thing that they know, but they don't know, if you know what I mean, which I'll get to in the next book and how that works. Okay, so that's basically some sort of things I think that I skimmed over or missed a little bit in this book. In the end of the book, Swan comes back and he has a conversation about representation and paintings and things of that nature, and talks about dying and how he's near death, and about the importance to him of being pro-Dreyfus. But I'm not going to talk about that because I talked about that last time. So that's essentially this book. And now I think we are ready to move on to Sodom and Gomorrah in a week, because next week I'm going to be doing a different book, and you'll see what that is soon. Bye.